Allen Lund Company has new offices in Ogden, Utah and Indianapolis, Indiana. Check allenlund.com to reach them.
OOIDA, representing America's truckers since 1973, presents Landline Now with your host, Mark Redding.
When disaster strikes across America, the helpers spring into action. But that's not always an efficient process, especially when it comes to logistics. That's where the American Logistics Aid Network steps in. Executive Director Kathy Fulton joins us to talk about the network's mission. From data misrepresentation in Congress on speed limiters and efforts to wrest back control of regulatory authority to predatory lease purchase agreements and marijuana regulations, we've got plenty of new developments to break down in our latest Landline Roundtable discussion. Tyson Fisher and Mark Schrimmer of Landline Magazine join the show. And finally, anyone who's been in trucking for any amount of time has heard the cry from large carriers that they're experiencing a driver shortage, despite a nearly 100% turnover rate. Marty Ellis has heard from truckers on the topic, and he has some perspective to share. But first, the news with Scott Thompson.
Thanks, Mark. Our top story today: just weeks after the Supreme Court stripped power away from federal agencies by overturning the so-called Chevron doctrine, a group of senators are working to cement that doctrine into law. A coalition of senators led by Senator Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts introduced the Stop Corporate Capture Act. The bill would codify the Chevron doctrine, essentially resurrecting it. Opponents of the Chevron doctrine argue that it gave too much power to politically motivated agencies. Supporters claim agencies are the experts on subject matter relating to a regulation and relevant statutes. We'll have much more on this bill later on in the program with Tyson Fisher and Mark Schrimmer of Landline Magazine. We continue to monitor efforts in Congress to fund transportation projects and agencies for fiscal year 2025. The Senate Appropriations Committee on Thursday approved its version of the THUD funding bill. It stands in contrast to the House version, which includes $200 million in funding for truck parking projects and a prohibition on a speed limiter mandate. The Senate bill doesn't include either, but it does have an ELD exemption for livestock haulers and calls to address the truck parking crisis and predatory towing. There's also a section requiring FMCSA to research and report on alternative warning devices for autonomous trucks. In the end, the House and Senate will need to agree on a final appropriations bill. If this year plays out like previous years, the Senate version will be the one that passes. The OOIDA Foundation's latest market report has some positive indicators if you squint hard enough. The data from June suggests that demand was up, something the foundation attributes to seasonality, and operating costs remain high with volume and demand flat, meaning a future outlook that remains negative. However, Assistant Director of the foundation, Andrew King, is seeing some positive signs.
You can definitely say that. I mean, start with even just the load-to-truck ratio. For van, for example, the last 2 months, not only has it increased, but it's been quite a substantial increase. The previous month it was 24%, and then this last one is 7.5%. So those are positive trends. That's very good. And of course, that means that there are more loads than trucks. That means demand is increasing. And that seems to be the sentiment in some areas. It's not everywhere, but there are some blips of this that demand is ticking upward. And that obviously has a positive relationship with rates.
Van rates were up in June by 4 cents a mile, reefer by 2 cents. King said the road to recovery will be long, but that we're heading in the right direction, albeit slowly. To check out the full report with analysis for yourself, head to ooida.com/foundation. Meanwhile, more cautious optimism courtesy of the ATA For-Hire Truck Tonnage Index. Tonnage did slip in June by 0.4% year over year, reversing the first increase in 15 months recorded in May. However, the slippage wasn't as pronounced. ATA Chief Economist Bob Costello in the report said truck freight tonnage is slowly going in the right direction since hitting a recent low in January. Costello added that despite June's decline, the second quarter average was 0.2% above the first quarter and just 0.2% below the second quarter in 2023. Good signs, he said, that truck freight might be finally turning the corner. A House bill designed with small business owners, including owner-operators, at front of mind has picked up some more support. Congressman Mike Flood of Nebraska and Congressman Brian Stile of Wisconsin are the 11th and 12th co-sponsors of H.R. 7198, known as the Prove It Act. The bipartisan bill was introduced by Congressman Brad Finstad of Minnesota earlier this year. He wants to require that federal agencies consider how new regulations might affect small businesses before moving forward with them. The Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association is among those supporting the Prove It Act. The association says the bill would help keep government overreach and burdensome overregulation off of the backs of the men and women behind the wheel who keep our economy moving. The first lawsuit challenging the decision to pause New York City's congestion pricing program has been filed. The class action lawsuit was filed on behalf of bus and transit riders. The controversial congestion pricing plan called for tolls for vehicles entering the central business district starting on June 30th. On June 5th, however, New York Governor Kathy Hochul paused the plan. The new lawsuit does not challenge the governor's congestion pricing pause directly. Rather, it targets the Metropolitan Transportation Authority for cutting bus routes, blaming the pause for those cuts. The plaintiffs argue that the cuts will result in longer wait times and more crowded buses, things the lawsuit claims will harm public safety. The U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention simplified new regulations on dogs being brought into the country. The new rules going into effect on August 1st will be relaxed for dogs coming from countries that are dog rabies-free or low risk. Dogs crossing the border from low-risk countries will only be required to appear healthy and to be accompanied by a CDC dog import form receipt. That's watered down from the initial plan, which would have required all dogs entering the U.S. to be at least 6 months old, have a microchip, and have a completed import form. The CDC said it's making the change after some pushback from the public. Some of that feedback came from the Canadian Trucking Alliance, which said the new regulations could cause a logjam at the border. The Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration is holding its third and final public listening session next week as it seeks to change the safety fitness determination process for motor carriers. It's taking place virtually on the afternoon of Wednesday, July 31st. This will be FMCSA's third listening session dedicated to the safety fitness determination process, the agency looking to develop new ways to determine when a motor carrier is not fit to operate commercial motor vehicles. Disaster emergencies have been extended for nearly 30 Iowa counties in response to widespread flooding. The extension, which runs through August 17th, replaces 3 disaster proclamations that were issued in June. The disaster order waives state regulations that restrict the movement of loads carrying relief on Iowa highways. Hours of service requirements are also suspended, but it's worth noting that the waivers do not include the interstate system. Vehicles providing direct relief are also allowed to weigh up to 90,000 pounds without needing a permit. We've got some new truck stops to tell you about. Travel Centers of America just opened up 4 new locations. 2 are in Henderson, Nevada, across Interstate 11 from each other, with more than 300 truck parking spots combined between the two. The other 2 are in Cowpens, South Carolina, and Coburg, Oregon. And Love's has a new stop in Delphos, Ohio. The location off US 30 and Lincoln Highway has 86 truck parking spots. And finally, in case you missed it, the Oscar Mayer Wienermobile ran into some trouble in Chicago this week. It hit a car along Interstate 294 near Oak Brook on Monday, causing the driver to lose control and overcorrect, which led to a rollover. The Wienermobile had to be hauled out on a flatbed, but aside from some damage, the good news here is that no one was hurt. That's Landline Now News for today. I'm Scott Thompson.
Thanks, Scott. You can write a letter to your elected officials in Congress or look up contact information for lawmakers on the state and federal level by using the website fightingfortruckers.com. Marty Ellis and OOIDA's tour truck, The Spirit of the American Trucker, are at the Top Gun Large Car Shootout. That takes place at the Rantoul National Aviation Center in Rantoul, Illinois. Stop in, say hi to Marty, and join OOIDA for a $10 discount. Next, Scott Thompson discusses helping during a disaster with Kathy Fulton of the American Logistics Aid Network. Tyson Fisher and Mark Schremer of Landline Magazine join the program to wrap up the news of the week, and Marty Ellis of the Spirit of the American Trucker shares some thoughts about the alleged driver shortage. We'll be back in a moment with more of the program. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe. If you want more content, go to landline.media to get updated news, information, and archived editions of our show. Once again, that's landline.media.
Capital Reman is your leading source for quality remanufactured engines and components. Capital Reman stands ready to serve all OOIDA members to help reduce costly engine repairs or replacement. Visit capitalreman.com today and use code OOIDA10 to save.
ULSD is hurting your engine. Fight back with Howe's Diesel Defender. Get the most powerful cleaning and maximum lubricity to protect and extend the life of your entire system. At a guaranteed increase in fuel economy, and you can't go wrong with Howe's.
Dispatch, I picked up that load of steel, so I'm ready to roll.
Sounds good. Remember, we're getting paid by weight, so make sure to use a CAT scale.
I wouldn't weigh anywhere else.
Forget misaccuracy when you're truck on a CAT scale.
It's tested and proven. Burn 2.1% less fuel when you balance all wheel ends with Centromatic. Call 800-523-8473 to get the OOIDA discount.
Landline now, welcome back. When disaster strikes across America, the helpers spring to action. But that's not always an efficient process. While studies show that up to 80% of crisis spending goes toward logistics, up to 40% of that total may be wasted, simply because organizations don't have the right supply chain equipment, knowledge, or services at their disposal. That's where the American Logistics Aid Network, or ALAN, steps in, and they're stepping up in several places right now. Executive Director Kathy Fulton joins us to talk about ALAN's mission and how you, as a professional truck driver, can help them carry it out. Kathy, first of all, thanks for being on the program. We appreciate it.
Yeah, it's so great to be with you guys today, Scott.
And we've got a lot of ground to cover here. I want to start, though, with the American Logistics Aid Network. There may be folks out there who are not really familiar with what you do. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do and, I guess, how you do it as well?
Sure. So American Logistics Aid Network, or we just say ALAN, it's a lot easier, was actually one of those nonprofits that was formed after Hurricane Katrina. What sets us apart, really, is that we were actually formed by industry. So all of the business community, the truckers and the warehouse people and the material handling people got together and said, you know what we're seeing happen along the Gulf Coast is really a logistics challenge. We're the experts. We do this day in and day out. We need to have a way to provide support to communities that have been affected by disaster. And that's really how our organization was born. So 20 years next year, we're getting really close there. But a little bit about what we do is we work with businesses who are interested in providing support in a humanitarian response, whether that's, whether it's a hurricane or a fire or a flood, whatever that cause for a crisis in a community. We work with businesses who are offering their support, whether it's donated transportation, material handling equipment, warehousing. We're matching them with the organizations who are doing the on-the-ground support. So I tell people, ALAN is not going to be the organization that is handing out the bottled water after the disaster, but we're going to be the organization that makes sure it gets there.
I want to go back. You mentioned Hurricane Katrina, August 2005, kind of the birth of ALAN. That was an eye-opening event, obviously, for a whole lot of people. I think not just in that area, but the entire country, just because it was such a massive disaster. You talked about kind of the realization there that there was something missing in terms of response to disasters like this. Before ALAN was around, obviously we had FEMA and they were on the ground, first thing after everything happened there. But what was the realization specifically? Was it just, hey, we don't have the organization we need to respond to things like this? What exactly was that realization?
Yeah, I think the realization is that at the end of the day, everything is about logistics. There's an old adage that talks about leaders studying logistics, right? If you want to be the person who understands what's really happening, if you want to be the person who can actually get things accomplished, you focus on the logistics. And that's the realization that it's our industry. It's the people who are moving stuff every single day who understand what's really at stake. We know how to get things into places. We know how to deal with roads that are blocked or, trees that are down. We deal with those mini crises every single day. And that was the realization, if we can harness the entire industry's knowledge around that getting stuff done, that's the way that our whole country can be better off when a crisis occurs.
So talk to me about harnessing that knowledge and the skill sets that are out there. You've got a lot of different players obviously involved in a disaster response operation, what you're doing there. What are those different players? And I think in particular, obviously, of interest to us is how truck drivers factor into all that.
Yeah. So there are a ton of different organizations who are involved in crisis response. And let's just start with the local community and the people themselves who've been affected. You see neighbors helping neighbors, and that's where it should start. But we know that when a big crisis occurs, when a big disaster happens, that community is going to be without things that they need, right? They're going to be without power. They're going to be without water. They're going to be without communications, probably. So these things have to come from somewhere else. That's where the logistics community gets involved. That's where, the nonprofits who are both in the community, outside of the community, get involved. They come and they set up massive tents to feed people, or they set up cooling centers, or they set up places where you can charge your phone. And it takes logistics, it takes transportation to get those resources to that community. That's where truck drivers get involved, whether they are working for an organization that is providing those services for fee, right? They're contracted to do it. Or if they are part of an organization or an individual who says, you know what, I know how to do this. I just want to help. That's where truck drivers are really important to the crisis response. It's getting those materials to the communities that need them. It's providing those resources that have been destroyed because of the disaster. Sometimes that means moving things from, a county away. We just did that for Hurricane Beryl, where we literally moved water within the same county to a city that was without. And sometimes it means moving things that can't be, provided within that region from across the country. So the only way to do that in a timely fashion in order to serve disaster survivors is through just the skills and expertise that the trucking community brings.
Yeah, and as you're well aware, and we're all well aware, the trucking community is full of people who want to help, who are willing to help, who offer to help in so many different ways. We see it all the time. Is this one of these situations where, I know it's going to depend probably on the areas that you're in, but do you have kind of a list of reliable people who step up and are willing to help when help is needed? Or is it kind of just you're throwing out a call out there and saying, hey, if you're in this area of the country and you're able to help, we need this on this day, who can do it? Is it kind of a mixture of both those things?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a both-and situation on how we're helping get resources to an area. We work with a lot of the large organizations, a lot of the large logistics companies that are out there, but we also know that it's those individuals, it's the smaller organizations who are getting stuff done as well, right? So we may run into a situation where a large company is not able to donate or not able to provide something. And so we're really looking for those local and regional resources. We do keep a list on our website, and I'll repeat this again, but it's alanaid.org, ALANAID.org. We keep a list of everything that's active out there. Any requests that we receive, whether it's transportation, anything, warehousing, material handling equipment, that list is what we're working on right now. And that's where people can go and find out, how can they get involved and how can they help.
Yeah, I was looking at the list of disaster areas that you're currently active in. It's a long list. I know it's probably always a long list, unfortunately. But can you go over some of the areas that you're active in right now? You mentioned Hurricane Beryl earlier. I imagine there are a lot more of those, right?
Yeah. And what's interesting is, Hurricane Beryl, we've had a lot of things happen in our country just in the past couple of weeks, and that unfortunately has gotten out of the news cycle as much as it probably would have without all the other things happening. But, even so, Hurricane Beryl in South Texas, we're also working in the Caribbean, which means if things are coming from the States and need to get to a port or an airport, we need people who can, move those resources for us there. So we're doing some Caribbean support. We're also working on things that, just happened a couple of months ago, but probably people have forgotten about. There were tornadoes, in Arkansas that we have partners who are still helping people, clean out their houses and rebuild and just providing for their basic needs. And we're always looking for support, helping with things like that. California has their own challenges with weather and fires and whatnot. So it seems like we're always providing support to California. It's across the board, right? Everything from the Gulf Coast and the east, eastern seaboard for hurricanes to fires across, in the Pacific Northwest. If there's a disaster happening, our team is out there actively working to support the folks who are on the ground providing assistance.
As I mentioned earlier, and I know you've seen it firsthand, that the trucking community does answer the call when things like this happen. There may be people out there that weren't even aware of what you're doing out there and weren't even aware that they might be able to provide some help in some of these situations, especially if they're in an area of the country that needs some help. For those listening right now, they're thinking, hey, this is something I'm interested in. I'd like to help maybe if something happens down the line. What should they know? Or I guess maybe what would you want them to know about helping out with Alan?
Yeah, I love that. We love working with new people. We love bringing new volunteers and new organizations into the fold and helping them see how they can help their communities. The best way to get started is just to reach out to us via our website, allanaid.org, ALANAID.org. And, just tell us, hey, just send us a note and ask, how can I help? Here's what I do. Here's how I think I would want to be involved. Put me to work. And that's all it takes. We keep that list. We keep a list, and then we're always doing outreach. And if there's something that meets the skills and the geography and the interest of that organization or individual, we're going to call them. We can't do this alone. We're a very small organization. We keep things pretty lean because we want to make sure that all of our donors' dollars are going to support the people in need. So it's just a small staff reaching out through the network of generous truck drivers and other logistics professionals.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you reach out and you have that information, you may not, I imagine they may not get called on for weeks, months, maybe even a couple years or something. But when that need is there in that particular area, they're going to get a call or an email or what have you, right?
That's right. And we're always trying to make sure we acknowledge, hey, we've heard you, you're on our list. But if there's something that pops up and you want to help, and you haven't heard from us, maybe we didn't know that was a problem. So reach out to us and say, hey, here's this issue that I'm seeing in my community. And that helps make us all better. Alan has lots of organizations that we work with. So if something's, not getting the attention it needs, Alan can be that conduit to the broader humanitarian response community to say, hey, maybe we need to take a closer look at this particular community. Yeah. We've talked about the low attention disasters because of the speed and, just the volume of news that's out there. Truck drivers see things that, because they're in communities that we can't ever get to, they see things. We need their eyes and ears to help make us all stronger and better together.
Absolutely. Love it. You're doing great work. We appreciate it. Give us that website one more time.
Thanks, Scott. It's allanaid.org, and that's ALANAID.org, or just Google American Logistics Aid Network. We should pop up for you.
And there you have it. Our thanks to Kathy Fulton of the American Logistics Aid Network. We'll pop out for a quick break now, but hang tight. Landline Now returns in just a moment.
Every year, 28 million people are trafficked globally. The Your Roads Their Freedom campaign seeks to raise awareness in the transport industry. Truck and bus drivers, be vigilant on the roads. If you see something suspicious, text 233-733 or be free.
Truckdown.com. Whenever you have a breakdown, you need Truckdown.com. 24/7 access to 40,000 verified heavy-duty repair vendors nationwide. Less weight, more freight. Truckdown.com.
Firestone tires are for more of everything, with more durability for more miles and more confidence in your fleet. Firestone's tested tires help fleets save with value where it matters most. Learn more at bridgestonenationalfleet.com/4moremiles.
And we're back. Time now to run down some of the biggest stories in trucking over the past couple of weeks with the brain trust of Landline Magazine, Mark Schrimmer, Tyson Fisher. You've heard them laughing there already, emerging from their caves with fresh data, fresh takes, and they join us now. How you doing, gentlemen?
Pretty good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm doing well. Thank you.
Before we start running here, I want to play a clip from a House T&I subcommittee hearing that took place on Wednesday. You may have heard OOIDA Executive Vice President Louis Pugh testifying there. Mark, there was one exchange from the hearing that I know you were paying close attention to. We're going to play this first. This is Congressman Seth Moulton of Massachusetts making the case for speed limiters on heavy trucks.
You mentioned that it must be special interest groups or whatnot who are pushing these technologies. In the last year for which we have data available, 20% of fatal truck crashes occurred over speeds of 70 miles per hour, resulting in about 1,000 deaths.
All right, Mark, there it is. I'm going to let you take the ball and run with it because I know you got some thoughts here.
Yeah, this is a perfect example of where sometimes statistics and something that's just kind of set off the cuff is really taken out of context and misleading. What we have here, if you're listening to that quote, what do you think? You think that he is citing that this many trucks were speeding or going 70, 75 miles an hour down the highway and were involved in fatal crashes. But that's not the statistic that he's citing. FMCSA, back when they started this whole speed limiter rulemaking, which is what he's advocating for here, is they launched a statistic from 2019 that showed that 860 trucks that were traveling in a 70 or 75 mile an hour speed limit were involved in a fatal crash that year. I reached out to FMCSA back then to ask about this. Okay, how fast were these trucks actually going? They had no clue. They did not have that information. They didn't know how fast they were. How many of these trucks were speed limited? They did not have the answer to that question. So you have what they are calling a problem of 860 trucks in 70, 75 mile an hour zones were involved in fatal crashes. So what do we need to do? The solution in their mind is to speed limit these trucks. The problem is all of those trucks could have been speed limited theoretically. We have no idea how many of them were speed limited. They could have been traveling 60 miles an hour. They don't know. But the solution to the problem is something that may have already occurred. But the reality is that's also kind of left out of this is also from 2019, FMCSA came out and said 90.6% of the trucks involved in these crashes, no moving violations, no problem. So it's, again, this quote is giving this idea that these trucks are just barreling down the highways at a horribly high rate of speed, but that's not what was going on.
Right, and that's a frustrating thing, I think, about this conversation with speed limiters, and we saw it play out really in that congressional hearing there within the T&I subcommittee, was that you've got these two sides, and despite the numbers being misquoted, for one, is frustrating. But then just the fact that the numbers don't seem to matter to the people who are, and they've got the stance and they're staying on it, and I kind of understand it because in theory it sounds like it makes sense, right? But when you look at the numbers, it doesn't. Yeah,
and let's going back to those numbers, going even further. So, also in that quote, he says 20% of these crashes, of fatal crashes are in these speed limits.
Right.
What he's leaving out is that the majority of crashes, 33 0.3% are actually in 50 and 55 mile an hour zones. And let's also kind of add in this idea. One of the arguments from OOIDA and people that are against speed limiters is we have to remember the whole kind of trucking landscape. And what do we have? Truckers are paid by the mile, right? Okay, so if you're traveling in a 75 mile an hour zone and you're making a truck not able to go any faster than 60.
Yeah.
Okay, that's costing them money, correct?
Yep.
We can all agree on that. So what happens when you get in that 50 mile an hour zone?
Trying to make up time.
That truck is likely, human nature.
Yeah.
They are incentivized to go 60 or as fast as they can go through it if you speed limit them down to 65. And so while 860 crashes were in 70 and 75 mile an hour zones in 2019, 1,491 were in 50 and 55 mile an hour zones. And what we're also seeing, we also have statistics that show that these large fleets that are speed limited, that I think Maverick and Trucking Alliance had come out with something about a year ago that said 98% of our trucks are speed limited, and they're advocating of how much safer this is. We found hundreds of speeding violations and crashes for these trucks.
Yeah.
They're still speeding.
Right.
They're just speeding in different zones and actually more dangerous zones that are more prevalent to have these fatal crashes because, construction, all of these different things that might be going on.
Right.
So you really do have to look at these, and you can't just hear one. I'm sure the congressman thought they had a great soundbite there at the time.
Yeah.
But the reality is
the math doesn't work out. Yeah. All right. Thus concludes our math portion of today's exam. Tyson, I want to talk to you about the Chevron doctrine, the decision there in the Supreme Court. We've talked about it on the show plenty of times, but essentially it's stripping the power of federal agencies to put these regulations into effect that are not mandated or given permission by Congress to do. There is a new angle to this, Tyson, and this has spurred some conversations, some action in Congress, right?
Yeah, so there is a coalition of Democrat senators and Bernie Sanders, but they introduced—
caucuses with the Democrats, yep.
Yes, he does. Introduced a bill seeking to reform the regulatory process. So in their point of view, corporate interest groups have, hijacked the regulatory process while the general public remains largely uninvolved. So they're trying to fix that. And one way they want to fix that is they want to codify the Chevron doctrine, into federal law. So, as you mentioned, the Supreme Court, it dismantled that precedent that was set that gave power to federal agencies, took it away from them and into the hands of federal judges. This bill wants to basically, reinstate the Chevron doctrine via federal law, which is the thing they can do if it gets passed. But it pretty much it resurrects this whole issue of the Chevron doctrine and puts it in the hands of Congress to do something about it, as opposed to the federal court system. So that's kind of what this bill is attempting to do.
It would basically put things back to where they were a month ago,
pretty
essentially.
much, right? Yeah. And so and there's pros and cons to that. The Democrats see it as that the Chevron doctrine was a good thing, so they want to put that back in place. And mind you, this was precedent for 40 years. So for 40 years, this is how the federal government ran in terms of establishing certain types of regulations. So they just want to return to that status quo is one thing that they want to do.
Yeah, and one thing with all of this, and we heard some of this in the hearing this week about this. This is not going to go back to things like the ELD mandate. It's not going to be able to, overturn that or throw that out, right? We're looking to forward, whatever comes down the line here with regulations. We're not looking backward. So whatever happens with all of this, it's going to be what happens in the future. Right?
Yeah, pretty much. And there are some regulations that we can go back and challenge, not all.
Sure.
And then even then, there's a good chance that the federal courts would just say like, oh, no, we had it right the first time, so we're good to go. So, there's a lot of pieces to this, but essentially, yes, these Democrats want to put that status quo back into place. And then on top of that, they want to do further reform to the regulatory process. One thing they want to do is they want to expedite that process. So they want to allow courts to force an agencies to start the rulemaking process if it has not done so within a year after that statute, given that the authority to do so was put into place.
Yeah.
We see that all the time with agencies that are kind of just sitting on a directive to do something. But the thing is, there are a lot of reasons why they may do so, collecting information and stuff like that.
Yep.
But a lot of interest groups saying, no, we wanted this rule, we want it now. Why are we sitting on this? And so this bill would say, all right, you got a year to do this.
Gotcha.
So, yeah.
It would speed up the process there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot of I'm not very optimistic that this thing is going to pan out, but hey, I've been surprised before, I suppose. I want to shift real quick here, and we'll try to make some quick hits here. Truck Leasing Task Force, Mark, you've been following these meetings throughout. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau gave a presentation at the most recent one and kind of furthered the discussion, furthered what they had already been kind of saying here, that this model, the lease purchase model, is broken. That's the most I can use a lot of words there, but broken maybe.
I think kind of the best way to kind of sum this up. So this presentation was slated to be a half hour, and it went more than an hour and a half. And it was just basically all the presentation was lining up all of the ways that these agreements are set up against the truck driver and why they're in a bad position. And this is just touching on the start of it, as the way the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau put it. This is just the soup before the meal. This is the appetizer. They're going to have a report here in coming months that are going to outline all of the problems. Just so many terrible examples where it's just a predatory scheme, and truck drivers, it needs to stop and they need to be protected. But it'll be interesting as we follow this.
Yeah, and I think they are going to be working through November.
But that's when they have to file their report.
It does seem like we're getting pretty close to a consensus here about changes being needed with this model.
100%.
We don't have a whole lot of time, Tyson, but I did want to talk to you about marijuana reclassification. Department of Justice moving that direction, obviously. A lot of concern in the trucking industry about what effect this might have on the industry. The comment period ended this past week, I believe, and OOIDA took a stance that basically reflects what the Department of Transportation is saying.
Right. So there was a lot of concern as how this rescheduling will affect the drug policy. Will marijuana remain illegal for truckers? So recently, Pete Buttigieg made some clarification saying basically this rescheduling will not affect the drug policy. And so in its comments, OOIDA basically said, yeah, we agree with that assessment. That's the way it should be. And I think at this point, everyone agrees with that. I think there's a pretty large consensus among everybody that truckers probably shouldn't,
shouldn't be smoking in the cab. I think that's pretty safe to say.
But with that said, it does open the door for that to be a possibility to modify. So that what OOIDA and other stakeholders want to see is a lot of things to be addressed, including impairment detection,
which we don't really have right now.
We do not have. So we have to consider that first and foremost, I think. Detection, and then impairment levels from there. But then they also bring up other good points, which is, you also have to think about the medical benefits and then driver retention. These are all, factors that need to be considered. But, right now, as far as we know, is not going to directly affect the drug policy that the DOT has in place. And I think it's everyone agrees that let's try to make sure that remains the case moving forward.
Yeah, we were talking earlier. I'm not too concerned that you're going to have a whole bunch of people saying, yeah, it's fine for truck drivers to be smoking marijuana in the cab, right? I think everybody's on the same page here.
Yeah.
We don't want impaired driving.
Right.
It's just a matter of kind of finding the language and putting the rules in place.
And that's what the comment period for rulemakers are for, to address these issues. And so hopefully when the DEA, when or if they issue a final rule, they'll look at these comments like, maybe we should put in a provision that explicitly prohibits marijuana for, the DOT drug policies and other federal.
Yeah, a lot of interest in this topic. As you might imagine, there were, tens of thousands of comments, I think, on that. So not the end of this story, for sure, not the end of really any of these stories that we've talked about today. Mark Tyson, we appreciate it, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks.
We'll step out for a minute, but we're back right after this.
Today's rising costs affect everyone. Replace your harmonic damper with a genuine Vibratech TVD viscous damper to prevent costly repairs and downtime. Keep your money in your pocket and your truck on the road with Vibratech TVD. Recommended replacement at 500,000 miles or 15,000 hours.
Ready to make more money? Use a better load board. For a limited time, get 50% off TruckStop Load Board Pro. Just go to truckstop.com/go and enter promo code READY2024 when you purchase Load Board Pro.
Are you tired of the IRS following you around like a dark cloud? Call 888-557-4020 and get your life back.
Since you started, what you've loved about trucking is the freedom. Heading out on your favorite route, a good driving song, and thinking about truck insurance. Well, maybe not that last one. That's why we're here. At OOIDA, we have a full range of truck insurance products, expert advice, and great customer service, helping you get the right coverage for your operation. Go to OOIDA.com because your job is to drive. Our job is to help with everything else.
Landline Now. Welcome back. Every week, we check in with Marty Ellis, who drives OOIDA's tour truck, the Spirit of the American Trucker. Anyone who has been in trucking for any amount of time has heard the cry from large carriers that they're experiencing a driver shortage, and that's despite the fact that they're recruiting enough drivers every single year to support a nearly 100% turnover rate, or in the case of some carriers, more. Marty has a few thoughts on the topic.
Carolina west to Denver, up to Bangor, west to Austin, coast to coast, sea to sea, sail on, sail on.
Well, Marty, how are you doing?
I am lovely, Mark, and you?
I'm doing great. Thank you very much. And we've got a lot of stuff going on, so I think this time we're going to dive right into the issues that you're hearing about there at the Spirit. And one of them, this drives me crazy, is the continuing talk about the alleged driver shortage. And what is the latest thing you're hearing from people on that?
Yeah, it's a big frustration for especially the owner-operator that sees the rates on the load boards, which have been down for basically a couple of years now. Now, they were up high during the COVID era, and because a lot of people weren't out driving, weren't out working, and so we had to entice people basically to take these loads. But what the rates are right now are really low. I looked at a guy's load board on his phone the other day, and they were offering a load at 67 cents a mile. And it's like, I don't know that I would even have the nerve to put that on a load board. And in some circumstances, that wouldn't even pay for fuel. So yeah, so you are definitely writing them a check to haul their stuff if you're accepting that load. Now, hopefully, I would hope it would be an error that somebody entered in incorrectly, but I'm so afraid that it was not, and they were just hoping that somebody would bite on that load just to get them out of an area or home or whatever the case may be. But those numbers just are not realistic. And so I had several people ask, okay, so they say that there's a driver shortage, and, so explain to me how that works. And I said, well, this number's been bandied around 80,000 truck drivers. We're short 80,000 truck drivers. Well, the only way that would make sense is if the rates kept on climbing. Because if we're 80,000 truck drivers short, that means that things are sitting on the dock that are not being hauled. And so, produce would be rotting on the docks. You wouldn't be able to get your widget that you just ordered. So we have to look at this realistically. During COVID, there was a shortage of truck drivers out there because a lot of people did go home. Okay, people had either physical issues themselves, so they didn't want to risk themselves, or they had somebody in the families and they didn't want to risk bringing anything back. Okay, so that was all acceptable. That's why the rates were up during that time, and that's why a lot of people got into trucking during that time, because they were actually being compensated the way they should be for driving a truck. Well, now it's just the opposite, and I always tell people it's kind of like the perfect storm. I know that's an overused term, but there's really not a better term that I can think of, that the rates have been declining. And in the past, a lot of times when that happens, fuel will go down, parts and labor will go down. But this has been just the opposite. Everything has been going up, parts, labor, all that. And so the owner-operators are really getting squeezed. And as you can see in some of the companies that are closing down in trucking, okay, it's even affecting the bigger companies. So it's not just the owner-operator, but the owner-operator has that one truck, and he feels it so strongly. And we have to somehow get to our elected officials and make them understand just the logistics. This is why there is not a shortage, because the rates would be climbing, not going down. So let's just use common sense with it. Let's take a look at these numbers and then look why these companies are putting this out there. They don't want to compensate their drivers correctly and pay them what they should be paid to be out there driving a truck and leaving their families for long times. And then we also have to look at, they also want cheaper labor, so whether you want to agree with it or not, but we do give out visas for people to come over and work in the United States. And, during construction, they always use the words that, Americans, these are jobs that Americans don't want. Americans want jobs, but they want good paying jobs and jobs that have benefits. Or as an owner-operator, they want to be able to be compensated more for the risk that they're taking owning that business.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff to unpack in what you said there, Marty, and it's all good stuff. These visas, that is one issue that really bothers me because and this is why it's important for people to call their members of Congress and explain that there is not a driver shortage. Because as long as they think that, they open these visa programs up to bring more people in, which is going to just drive the rates down further.
Absolutely.
The other thing is there's a basic concept in economics, supply and demand. Right. If your demand is the same and your supply goes down, i.e. there's a driver shortage, the price goes up.
Absolutely.
The price being what the rates are. And why people can't simply see that simple economic formula. I mean, for educated people, as many members of Congress are, they sure do miss a lot of basic stuff.
Exactly. And that's why we're so thankful that we actually have, people in Washington, which is so necessary to help educate some of our lawmakers and even educate some of the bureaucrats that aren't elected. And that's a lot of people don't understand that they have just as much to do with what happens in our government that the elected officials do. We just as a population don't have the ability to either hire or fire them.
Yeah, absolutely. There's another couple of things I thought of in what you said, and one of them is you talked about people that take these low-paying loads just to, say, get home.
Right.
And they used to use the term or throw around the term backhauls.
Yep.
And, of course, there is no such thing as a backhaul. It's a haul.
Yep.
And, your backhaul is another guy's regular haul, and you're just helping push the rates down for everybody, including yourself.
Absolutely, and that's what happens. As long as you're willing to haul it for cheap, it's just going to be getting cheaper. We're taking a race to the bottom instead of a race to the top, and it's basically rewarding, whether it's brokers, whether it's shippers, where you're rewarding them for basically doing bad behavior. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so somehow we have to get that under control. I do understand people sometimes get in a financial position to just do something. But I always tell people, look, you can go broke sitting at home rather than go broke out there driving up and down the road, beating up your equipment. And a lot of people that are in decent financial shape, have things paid off and that, are able to sit at home and wait till they can find that good load and then go take it instead of just out there taking whatever's available.
It really is a matter of knowing how much it costs you to run every mile. We throw around the term cost of operations.
Yep.
That's really what we're talking about. And then making sure that whatever load you're taking at least covers that. And frankly, it should be more.
Absolutely. You have to make a profit. There's no reason to be out here if you're not actually making money to live on.
Yeah. And that's the thing. The goal of every trucker is the goal as it is for anybody who works, which is to take care of yourself and your family.
Absolutely. Have some sort of savings to rely on, all of that.
Okay. Well, Marty, unfortunately, we're out of time again, but I want to thank you for joining me. And any final words?
Hey, appreciate you having me, Mark. And just let everybody know, remind everybody, be kind to one another, and give that guy next to you a break.
Brothers of the highway, children of the wind.
Once again, that was Marty Ellis, who drives OOIDA's tour truck, the Spirit of the American Trucker. You can find Marty's next stop on our show and every day at our website, landlinenow.com. That's our program for today. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm Mark Rettig, and this is Landline Now.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe. If you want more content, go to landline.media to get updated news, information, and archived editions of our show. Once again, that's landline.media.
Penske owns and operates some of the best-maintained vehicles on the planet. Our used trucks come with a 5-year maintenance report and pre-sale inspection. So if you're in the market for a top-quality pre-owned truck, look no further. Search our inventory today at PenskeUsedTrucks.com.
Control your toll costs and eliminate tolling headaches with Prepass Tolls. Prepass Tolls means toll volume discounts. Just one invoice for all tolls and fewer violations. Call 877-878-5970 or go to prepass.com.
I'm a dad,
a son,
a husband,
wife.
I'm a writer,
photographer.
I farm.
I'm a veteran.
I love old cars, fishing,
my kids,
chrome,
and I am
a professional truck driver.
And together we are OOIDA.
OOIDA was founded by truckers to stand up and speak on behalf of truckers. We've done that by combining the individual voices of our members into a single, powerful voice. Protecting your interests, defending your rights.
Join us!
Make your voice heard. Join OOIDA, the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association. Call 1-800-444-5791 or visit OOIDA.com.